Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am very excited because today I'm speaking with Hadar from Accents Way. Now, Hadar, English is not your native language, yet you speak it without an accent. You sound just like a native speaker. You sound like
Mm.
anyone I would speak to in North America. So, how did you do it?
Well, I am not a native speaker, that is true, but I have trained to, I wouldn't say eliminate my accent, but to acquire a new accent, which was in my case, General American. So I studied the standard accent, and I did that because when I was 20, or 21, I enrolled in an acting school in New York City. And as part of my training, we were offered speech and pronunciation classes, but not just for foreign students, but for everyone. Because even um, the students who were from the US and from North America, they each had a different accent. So ultimately, they wanted to teach general Americans so that people would know how to use an accent, like a neutral accent that is not necessarily identified with a specific place, which is what I've learned and what I've acquired. And also later on, other dialects of English. And I did that back then so that I would have more opportunities as an actress in New York City or in the US. But with time, I discovered, the impact of doing this work, not just on how I sounded, but also on my confidence and my fluency in English, which we would probably talk about later. But that was the reason how it all started, or why it all started.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that at 20 you enrolled in acting school. So, and interestingly that it was with other native speakers, which I want to discuss. But first, let me
Mhm.
ask you, at 20 or 21 when you enrolled, how was your accent? Could you tell where you were from? Did you speak with a noticeable accent at that time?
So yes, I would say that I had a non-native or foreign accent. So I had foreign features. My vowels were like I didn't distinguish between similar vowels. I didn't pronounce a th. So definitely my pronunciation was very different because I was applying some of the sounds and other phonological rules from my own native language. And I would definitely hear quite a lot, like the question, "Where are you from?" And I hated it because I was like, "Why are you asking me where I'm from? What's wrong with my English? Have I made a mistake?" And I think that back then for me, that it wasn't important to change because I was ashamed of not being a native speaker. It is what it is, that was who I was. But I think that it felt like it was robbing potential opportunities, and I wanted to have equal opportunities as other native speakers, and I think this is why I put a lot of focus into acquiring the general American accent.
That makes a lot of sense, especially since you wanted to be an actor at that time. Now, considering that my students watching this probably don't want to become actors, but do you still think it's important for them to try to reduce their accent? Can you speak a little more of what impact you feel that would make for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So um I think that different people have different accents and different pronunciations, and that's just like that's humanity, right? Even people from the same country or even state may have different ways of saying things, sometimes different words that they use. So we definitely don't want to have a world where there's no versatility or variety. It's not possible, and we don't want that. We don't want everyone to sound the same. The work that I do is important because I think that learning pronunciation can help you on so many different levels. First of all, you want to be clear. Like intelligibility is key when it comes to accent training or pronunciation training for non-native speakers. I don't do this to for my students to lose their accents completely. That is not the goal. And also, what is the message that we're sending? They don't need to. There's nothing to be ashamed of by speaking, having an accent. If anything, You should be proud for being able to speak another language, right? Like it's just proof that you know more than one language if you have an accent in a certain language. However, if your pronunciation is preventing you from getting what you want and sounding clear and causing you insecurity, and it makes you feel self conscious, and you have to repeat yourself, and you are constantly facing people with like a blank look on their face, then it's not serving you. And that already affects your fluency and your confidence and your ability to understand others. Now, I know that you do a lot of work related to listening and understanding others because it's so important when communicating in a second language. And learning pronunciation can help you with that because you're basically teaching yourself to hear and to listen through your mouth. The repetition of sounds and practicing reductions it helps you understand how the language is spoken, and it helps you understand native speakers better. So learning pronunciation is going to help you with building confidence, sounding clear, getting what you want, and also understanding others better. Now, there are other benefits for learning pronunciation, but I would say these are the top three when it comes to the benefits of doing this kind of work.
You made excellent points, and I do hear from my students a lot that they they feel too shy or ashamed of their speech in order to have those conversations because of their pronunciation, because of their accent, and I can imagine it really impacts them. And
Yeah.
so let's go back to when you were in acting school because this is so interesting to me. So you were in acting school with native English speakers as well. Can you tell
Hmm.
me what was your experience trying to improve your pronunciation or reduce your
Yeah.
accent compared to a native speaker trying to do that? I just
Yeah.
imagine if I had to learn to speak with a Texas accent or a British accent, I think that would be very difficult for me. So how do you think
Right.
that experience was different for you and native speakers you were doing this training with?
That's a great question. I think that first of all, I always felt a little inferior because it was like always, oh, it's so easy for them, right? It wasn't just, the exercises and the sentences that we had to read. Some of them were so complicated to me, also in a semantic level. Like I didn't understand what it meant because it was like all these old school vocabulary, and they kind of like they just read it and I had to read it before everyone else like 10 times in my head to be able to say it confidently, and even then I wasn't confident. So I felt like I had to catch up to even be close to where they were at the same time, I feel like that gave me an incentive and motivation to do this work, and I worked a lot harder than everyone else, which of course, benefited me because I developed this. Um, uh, I became a very diligent student. I did the work. It impacted not just my pronunciation, but also my self esteem and how I perceived myself as a learner. Because I did the work, I showed up, I was consistent because I wanted to catch up with them, and I think that um, because of that, my improvement was pretty fast, and I also studied privately with two of my teachers so that I could, between the first year and the second year, I took a lot of private classes so that I would, at least have the same ability to have conversational English. And I think that work has paid off. The only thing that I think was a huge struggle was how the language was not immediate to me, right? Like, especially when we had to improvise or when we had to speak in class about how we feel and things like that. Like, it was very easy for them to communicate. And for me, the language was not that available. I was self-conscious about how it sounded. I did all this pronunciation work. So I was always like in my head, listening to myself from the outside. And I felt like I wasn't fully expressive. I wasn't able to express myself as fully as my colleagues. So I think that was also a challenge that I had to face. And I think that's the thing, like non-native speakers, they in many situations at work, when writing emails in global companies, in acting schools, at universities, they probably need to work harder than their native peers if the environment is in English. But it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we need to kind of like understand how to work with those thoughts and make sure that we don't see ourselves as victims, but only as, you know, people with the power to do those things that we want and to change.
Yeah, I like that perspective of turning what might be a weakness into a strength because if we were both in acting school, I might not prepare as much because I'm like, oh, this will be easy. But then you're taking the time to
Yeah.
prepare. So you might beat me because you took the time to prepare. Same with job interviews or giving presentations,
Yeah.
giving speeches. Native speakers might just be like, oh, I don't need to prepare. But then you're busy working. You're working hard. You're going to outwork me. So that's a good
Yes,
point for
that's
everyone to
exactly
remember.
it. Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, keeping in mind my students aren't probably going to go to acting school or want to invest the significant amount of time that you have to improve their accents. Can you share some strategies or exercises from acting school that could
Yeah.
be relevant to just a broader audience?
Yeah, I can share the things that I've learned myself, and I kind of like modified it to suit my students who do this work not for the purpose of, you know, n- losing their foreign accent or anything like that, or becoming an actor or actors. Um, First of all, I think that when it comes to non-native speakers, it's really important to identify the top priority, right? Like the key sounds that prevent them from sounding clear. So for some people, they would say, "Oh, my flap T." Flap T is the "r" sound when the T is between two vowels, like in the word Betty or it is, right? And those people might be like, "Oh, I can't get it. It doesn't sound right. I pronounce it like a T sound," which is completely valid because there are dialects who use this pronunciation. And they might want to focus on that, but at the same time, they might be replacing the R with the L, right? And might say light instead of right. Something critical that if they make that mistake, they're going to be misunderstood. It's going to compromise their clarity. So it's really important to understand what are the things, the elements, the sounds that prevent you from sounding clear, that get in your way. So sometimes it could be the R sound because you feel self conscious, you feel like you're investing a lot of energy, you avoid words with the R, right? Like, so if that is the case, that probably would be a top priority. So it's important to not go and learn all the sounds of American English because some of them are not an issue, may not be an issue, but only the key sounds that affect your clarity, affect your confidence, intelligibility, so on and so forth. After that, it's important to learn how to produce it properly. And this is where you have hundreds and thousands of videos online that teach you specific sounds so you can go and learn how to produce the sound. It's physical, it's technical, right? What to do with the lips, what to do with the tongue, what to do with the jaw, where to place the sound. And then once you understand how to produce a sound that might be challenging, let's say the dark L, the L that appears at the end of words, well, let's say you say well, and then you've learned how to pronounce the dark L, well, now it's not enough because it doesn't mean that you'll be able to use it consistently when speaking. You have to turn it into a habit. Pronunciation is a habit. So once you learn how to produce a certain sound, you have to repeat it again and again. And usually I teach it in words, phrases, and sentences. So it's kind of like building up so that it becomes more natural for you. It becomes more spontaneous. And this is how you can start using it on your own, right? Like you have to do all of that work before expecting yourself to use it on your own or for it to change.
Great
So
advice.
that's
So
a
first,
start. Yeah.
identify what sounds that you need to improve. Now, what if at that point a student didn't actually know
Mhm.
how their accent is? I'm thinking back to my own experience, and I might when I'm speaking a foreign language, I might say something, but really not know if I'm saying it correctly. Do you have any advice to help these students even understand
Yeah.
what areas of their pronunciation or accent they need to work on?
Sure. So I would say that critical mistakes or the top priority would be eliminating sounds, and awareness is key. So I'm going to say those things, and then those watching, like our viewers, might need to record themselves and see if they're doing those things because you're able to hear it, right? Like, but sometimes when we speak and we're in our head, it's a little hard to notice it. So this is why using recordings is really good. If you drop sounds, mine instead of mind, tech instead of texts, okay, that happens for certain speakers. If you add sounds, so um, if instead of saying bus, you say basu, okay, you're adding a vowel sound at the end and you're changing the number of syllables. Instead of one syllable, it becomes two syllables. That is going to completely affect your clarity. There, luckily, these mistakes are not very common, but these are top priority. If you replace one sound that exists in English with another sound that exists in English, what do I mean? R's and L's, right? If you say light instead of right without thinking about it, or you are, but you're not working intentionally on it. The and w. A lot of people replace those sounds. Sa and th, okay? Sink instead of think. That could compromise your clarity. So I would put all of these as top priority. Below that, there are sounds like key sounds like the R, if it's mispronounced, the TH, sheep, ship, vowel pair, pool, pull, like similar vowel sounds that people merge. So they will say sheep and sheep for instead of sheep and ship, right? So merging sounds and then reducing the number of vowels that one uses. So that would be, it's important, it's not critical. Now, I would also say, so these are the things that people need to explore and see if they're doing. There's more, but I think that's a good start. Another thing that I would introduce would be prosody, intonation, rhythm, stress, connected speech, right? So if you tend to separate your words so that you sound clear, like I'm doing now, speaking in the sense of staccato, because of your first language, maybe that's how it is in your first language, or because you're trying to be clear. I think it's not a sound, but it's definitely an aspect of speech that is important for clarity because people are used to receiving the language or thoughts in groups, in chunks, right? And if you separate it, it's going to be harder for people to understand. So I would also say this is one of the things that students should focus on. I think um, that's enough for now.
It's
There's more, but
definitely enough.
yeah.
Yes, definitely enough to get them going for sure.
Yes,
And remember,
exactly.
everyone, take it one step at a time. You're improving these things, not immediately
Yeah.
everything, just work on one thing at a time. Now, as my students are improving these areas, do you have any suggestions for how they can be better understood, even with the
Mm.
accent they have now? Because I had an unfortunate situation where I was getting gas and I was trying to work the pump and it wasn't working. And a voice came on the intercom and
Mm.
said something. And I didn't understand it. I said,
Mm.
"What?" Because that's what we say in American English, "What?" And then he
Mhm.
repeated himself, and I still didn't understand it, and then he repeated it again, and after that 3rd time, I still didn't understand it, and it was a non-native speaker on the other side of the intercom. So what could
Mm.
that student do or other students do when they're in the moment? They aren't going to be able to change how they pronounce sounds because they're communicating right now. Is there any
Yeah.
strategies they can use to just be clearer with the accents they have?
Yeah. This is a good question and a good story because of course because It wasn't face-to-face communication, which
Yes,
makes it easier, right? That makes it easier for you to understand.
it
And
does.
I think, and you have experience working with non-native speakers, right? So even
I know
you,
I
if,
felt
and yeah,
terrible. I felt
yeah,
terrible that I couldn't now, probably most native speakers, I think a lot of native speakers do feel bad when they can't understand someone
mhm,
else because we want to help people. We want
right.
to be good listeners. And I felt very badly that I couldn't understand this
Yeah,
person. And I also felt like I probably made him feel bad because I had to ask him to repeat himself 3 times, and even after
yeah,
that, I still couldn't understand him. So I felt very bad
yeah.
about this situation.
I can imagine. And it's like it's very uncomfortable because you don't want to make someone feel misunderstood or bad or embarrassed in any way. So I think as if you communicate with anyone, native speaker, non-native speaker, and you feel like you're not clear or someone does not understand you, I would say the first thing, do not repeat saying what you just said in the same way because probably something there was not transformed or transitioned properly. It could be the sounds, it could be the specific words, and maybe the mispronunciation in one of the words that changed how you perceive the entire sentence. It could be the stress, right? Primary stress. Maybe a word was the primary stress was misplaced. Maybe the stress on the content word or the key word in the phrase was incorrect, right? Which is also really, really important, right? Which word you stress or you deliver the message. So do not repeat it in the same way. Try to use different words. Go slower. Okay. If you are on the phone or in a radio or whatever, raise your pitch a little bit. So you project your voice differently, right? Sometimes when we're down here, we sound a little muffled and the voice does not carry through properly. So you can change. Remember when we had masks back in during the pandemic and we had to change our voice to get through to the other person. So a lot of times I would notice that people subconsciously just raise their pitch, right? They go more nasal, they project their voice better. Do that, right? So don't repeat it one to one. Change something about maybe the wording or use different words. Slow down, change your pitch a little bit. And also, I would recommend deciding what is the, like really quickly, if you can do it, what is the most important word that is important here? If the person understands this word, would they make sense of the rest of the sentence, right? So the key word, the content word in English needs to be longer, louder, higher in pitch. Okay? Longer, louder, higher in pitch. So make sure that there is at least one word that sticks out. Say it longer, say it slower, and raise the pitch for it a little bit. And usually that would solve the problem, no matter what pronunciation mistakes you're making, because the other person will make sense of it. But they need something to work with, and I think that could help.
That's excellent advice for sure. And I think what you said about if they can't understand you, don't just say it again exactly the same way. Because if I couldn't understand you the first time, chances are I won't be able to understand you the second time. So I think all that advice you just gave would have definitely helped that person in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as a listener, and I bet that you can attest to it, that you get stressed out when you don't understand someone. And that also affects your ability to understand. So if it's repeated in the same way, it's really hard for you to now make sense of it all of a sudden because of
Yeah.
the also the emotional experience.
That's very true. Very true. Now, when you were working on your accent, were there specific mistakes that you think you made that slowed down your process of reducing your accent faster than you could have if you knew everything that you know now? And could you share some of these mistakes that you made so my students can avoid making these same mistakes?
Um, I think that I wasn't aware of prosody, intonation, rhythm, and stress, and connected speech and all of that. I did not learn that in school. I learned it vicariously because we would imitate and do shadowing. And when we worked on accents, then yes, like there is impact to the rhythm, but it wasn't something that I've learned about the American accent when I acquired the general American accent, right? So for me, I only focused on sounds, and there was still a missing link that was hard for me to understand what that was. Like I sounded, all the sounds were great, but there was still something that wasn't pulling together. And I think that had I put more focus on recognizing that all of that aspect, like prosody, the everything that is not the sounds that makes a huge part of how we communicate, I think it would have made things easier for me early on. I would have listened to it differently, paid attention to nuance, and improved faster. That's what I think. But I also think that being in acting school and doing this work, I got really good tools, like the repetitions. I could have practiced more between us. Uh, but um, but I think that a lot of the things that I've done back then, I teach them to my students today because I think the beginning method and how I worked was good specifically for sounds, but not for everything else.
And so what advice would you give to students so they can, if they're trying to work on their
Mm.
R versus L, they can watch a YouTube video to understand the mouth position, but how can they understand how those sounds are used in speech and that
Yeah.
connection, the intonation, what should they specifically do to improve those areas?
So for students who are not actively learning it, because you can learn it and you can practice it, but if you're not, then shadowing, for example, is a really, really great exercise to improve those um, aspects and also to develop intuition, right, around the rhythm and even without learning and practicing specifically rhythm, which you can, I teach it, but not everyone needs it. Not everyone has access to it. So shadowing, which means to find a speaker that you like. If you have the text in front of you, even better. You do that a lot on your channel, and then you listen to a line or two and you just imitate it. You just repeat it and again and again and again, and you try to kind of like focus on the melody and focus on the rhythm and focus on connecting the phrases together. And I think this is something that is very, very beneficial for doing this kind of work. Um, and also, I think just reading out loud or speaking intentionally, so recording yourself answering a question or talking about yourself, but focusing on a specific thing. Now I'm focusing on making sure that my R has like this nice, deep, rounded quality, or sticking out the tongue for the TH, or using more melody when I speak, right? So speaking freely, but being intentional about using one thing that you're trying to change, and going back to what you said about focus on one thing, that is really important when you do any kind of work, definitely pronunciation work. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed and confused and you don't benefit from it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you have already shared so many tips that my students can start using to improve their pronunciation, reduce their accent. So, to help them not feel overwhelmed, if they were only to do one thing, the very first thing that they should do, let's say this week to start working on their pronunciation and accent, what should they do?
So I would spend the week just trying to figure out what they would want to focus on and practice, and then put everything on the side and then say to themselves, okay, for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I'm going to focus on the R. I'm going to focus on and choose a sound. Like I think that is, if you're just starting out, sounds are pretty are a good place to start because intonation could be more vague. And if you decide to do it, then find the resources for yourself, the right videos teaching you that, and practice the sound with lots of repetition. Okay. So identify the sound. I know you said one thing, but it's kind of like identify the sound and then practice it. Don't expect yourself to use it. Just practice. If it's the R, learn how to make it and then just practice a lot of words with the R sound. Now, when we have ChatGPT and all these AI tools, it's so easy to generate lists of words, let's say with the R sound. Specifically with the R, it's easier. With others, it's not so much. So that's it. I think and I also think it's a lot of fun. I'm biased a little bit, but I do think pronunciation work can be fun if you have the right mindset and attitude.
I think that's a great point, and I agree, especially with your shadowing exercises. You have a lot of fun shadowing exercises on your YouTube channel, and even just focusing on individual sounds. It's a nice mouth workout, and I agree. So hopefully all my students will approach it with that mindset. It's going to be fun to work on my pronunciation, improve my accent. So now you have your work to do. You need to identify that one sound that you want to improve and then commit to practicing that sound for 1 week, 2 weeks, or as long as it takes to feel comfortable with that sound. So, everyone, put that one sound that you want to work on in the comments, publicly commit to working on that. And Hadar has many resources to help you. So, Hadar, can you share how my students can connect with you, where they can find you so they can get the resources to improve that one sound?
Yeah, 100%. So the best way is to just find me on my website, which is my full name, hadarshemesh.com. This is where you get access to all my videos, podcast, social media. But you can, of course, also find me on YouTube at Accents Way English with Hadar.
And of course, I will have everything linked up in the description so you can easily find it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Hadar, and sharing all your wonderful advice and wisdom with my students.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for having me.